screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The paupers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. The world seems to be changing swiftly, and the mainstays of all that we once thought was simple are increasingly and ever more complicated and difficult to navigate. It used to be accepted by science and society that there were essentially 3 sexes, and that gender meant the same as sex, stemming from one's sexual organs. Then came a host of philosophers like Derrida and Foucault who laid the basis for our changing ideas about sex, gender, and sexuality in essays that argued that sexuality and gender are social constructs, are fluid and changeable, and that it is okay to have sex with children who express genuine connection and desire for older adults. I'm not even joking. You can go look that part up. This is where things get ultra sticky, because if we are buying the false dichotomy of taking sides, one side says it is incredibly offensive to correlate pedophilia with changing ideas about sexuality and gender, and another side points to the roots of the movement, the foremothers and forefathers of gender theory, and wonders how it cannot be intricately connected with these genetics. The age-old question of nature versus nurture rears its head even concerning the theoretical and philosophical underpinnings of the movements themselves. So today we are going to tackle this messy quicksand trap of a topic with grace and with wit and a depth of heart and thought and with a side of mirth and smirking. And we will do so because of the stunning panel of guests we've got for you today on Rogue Ways. But first, before I introduce our panel, let me remind you all that Rogue Ways is part of the Eyes Open Network. Eyes Open provides a dynamic and multifaceted, echo-free space to think and reflect on the myriad convolutions of the modern world. We also have a network of goods and services, podcasts, and shows, all of which support minds that are awake and aware and hearts that are open and true. So come check us out at rogueways.org or in the Eyes Open Facebook or MeWe groups, because we would love to connect with you. And now, for our first panelist, we have Scott Daniel Summersgill. Scott is one intrepid savior of our young ones, a father and a lover, a self-styled apathetic activist, honest economist, guerrilla journalist, security enthusiast, and an entertainer. Scott, welcome to Rogue Ways.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, as always.
Awesome to have you. And next, I'm excited to introduce Dorothy Rex. Dottie can escape a straitjacket in 20 seconds, has escaped racism, classism, and familial oppression to the best of her abilities, and tried her hand at physics and found she'd much rather be traveling in Amsterdam, writing gorgeously, and reading tarot for people online. Dottie, we're going to have to swap readings one of these days. Welcome to Rogue Ways.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, I'm stunned and honored to be joined by the Rose Bovshov herself in the flesh. Rose is a hilarious and quick-witted, beautiful human who has found that the destruction of all she knew through a spinal cord stroke in 2005 was actually one of the best things that could have happened to her. After recreating a worldview and personality that did not rely on her genitalia and privilege, Rose is a crusader for humanity and celebrator of the beautiful diversity of human nature. She works every day to try to bring more spiritual unity to mankind in order to fulfill her dream to assist in the evolution of human consciousness, and does so alongside Crow 777 and Jason Lindgren behind the scenes on Crow 777 Radio. Rose, my twinsy, it's so good to have you here today.
Hey, Linz, it's so happy to be here.
Great to have you. So you guys, I usually start with a random question of the episode, and I am wondering, what is your favorite weekday activity?
Weekday activity. Well, okay, lately my favorite thing has been that my cat wakes me up because she's looking out the window at these Canadian geese that walk by. And I like to wake up with the sun, and so it's like the sun's coming in, and I look at the geese, and they're just like eating the lawn, and the cats are just like they want to die because they can't pounce. And so it's just really entertaining. It's like my morning television because I don't watch TV, so it's perfect.
You're like one of the rare humans who is enjoying morning time.
I never used to be like this until maybe maybe 6 months ago. It's really weird.
All right, what do you guys think? What's your favorite activity, Scott?
Honestly, it's kind of weird. I have the American History Channel on in the background now, a lot of the time, and the weird stuff that they talk about, and I noticed the other day they had a documentary about Hitler on, And I realized, like, with social engineering and everything that goes on, they were trying to make Hitler sound like Donald Trump in this documentary. And I'm, like, mind-boggled by this because they're just talking about how, it was like a mirror. And it was, like, the most absurd thing ever about how, like, Hitler was all about social commentary and this, that, and the third. And you could just see right through it. And it was insane. So every now and then, I get up and I look over and they got something goofy on. I'm just praying for a gun review because I'm a gun nerd, but every now and then something catches my attention. And that's just been something that, I was totally not expecting that.
Fascinating. Yeah, I can see why they would be doing that with their agendas nowadays. What about you, Dottie? What's your favorite weekday activity?
Lately it's been kind of trying to keep my feet on the ground, but I guess mostly I'm just kind of obsessed with YouTube lately, trying to figure out their algorithm and how this whole thing works out, because that's how I make my money. So lately that's been all I've been really thinking about.
Oh yeah, tell us a little bit about your channel.
Well, I have a YouTube channel where I do tarot readings and put weekly tarot readings out, but it's just like a case of learning how, to put out the videos and to jump through all of the little hoops that they have so that you can start to rank up and get views and things like that. So that's, half of the work is that,
Yeah.
So that's like really obsessive.
And as soon as you figure it out, they're going to change it all just to
pretty much.
Out, so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, where can people find you in case we forget to do that at some point in the show?
Oh, Bow and Arrow Tarot on YouTube. So yeah, you can just go to youtube.com, whatever, /C/Bow and Arrow Tarot. That's my channel. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thanks.
you.
And I was going to ask you guys if you're comfortable, and as much as you are comfortable, sharing with the people listening what your sex, gender, and orientation are, and whether or not you think it matters. And if you want, I can go first.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm a female. And my orientation is mostly heterosexual. I had, like a lot of people, some experiences or some times in my life where I thought I was lesbian, and I flirted around with that and played with some girls. But I always found that my deeper connections and urges are always towards men. And so I think I'm pretty heterosexual. But, if we're going with that idea that, no one's purely heterosexual, no one's purely homosexual, I guess I'm, a little bit off of the completely heterosexual side of things. I think girls are hot. I just don't want to actually touch their vaginas.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you. If for anyone that isn't sure, you'll know as soon as you come to face to face with vagina.
Yeah.
Whether or not you want to touch it.
They're very specific organs there, and they're I think they're horrifying personally.
I think that mine's horrifying, but I'm not horrified by other ones.
Interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now we're gonna.
But I don't really want to touch one.
Yeah. This is going to become a psychotherapy episode, but and then the last part of the question was, how much do you think it matters? And I guess to me, I think it matters to me. It's a deeply personal experience and choice, but if no one ever knew any of those things about me, it wouldn't change anything. So in that sense, I think it doesn't matter at all.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, I'll go next. I was born with a vagina, and I'm oriented towards penises. But in prison or jail, I'm pretty sure that I would have sex with girls just to get through it. I'd probably close my eyes and imagine it's a man. Yeah, or it would have to be a pretty desperate situation. But no, I definitely love penises. And I think that it matters because I want to know if the person who has a penis that I want to have sex with likes vaginas or not. And also, if I like penises, I want to know if the person I'm dating has a penis or if it's always been a penis. So that's the only time it matters to me is when it has to do with my specific vagina.
Well said. Yeah, totally.
Well said. Well said. I had my stint with, thinking I might have been bi or something, and it was just like male hormones going off the fritz. and I immediately found out I can try it, but not really. And I felt bad for people, though. I do think it matters to some people. There's a person that I dated. I won't say their name, obviously, but they're actually going through transition surgery, and and that's very interesting to me because they were very feminine. And I kind of feel bad for them that they have to like save up all this money and do all this shit to like feel like who they are. So for me, I actually care about that. But I don't think most people are really being honest with themselves. And I think that applies to a lot of areas of life. I think there's a lot of people in this world that don't know how to be honest with themselves, let alone other people a lot of the time. And it concerns me, but it's not, it doesn't affect my life personally. It's just, I just figured out I'm straight, and I decided that's the end of it. I love women. I care about what they think and what they feel. And men, not so much. I mean, I do, but like, I just agree with them. It's not a challenge. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's really, that's it for me,
Word. What about you, Dottie?
So I'm, well, I guess I would say that I identify as a female. That's my gender. And I would say that, yes, my sexuality is heterosexual. So, and I'm straight heterosexual. However, I have noticed that there is another component. So I would say I'm a dominant heterosexual. So that would impact whether or not I will be with a female. So I'm not actually attracted to females at all. However, in that dynamic, I think I could do that, right? So if I was, so you know what I mean? So that's it's a different kind of like area, you know what I mean? So, and that's only something that I've like thought about most recently, but for the most, I'm pretty much a heterosexual female.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because that one of the girls that I was very attracted to was very dominant, and I was attracted to that about her. And so afterwards I kind of recognized, like, well, she's very manly and she was dominant, and those are kind of some of the things that I'm attracted to in men. So so yeah, that is definitely a component in everyone's sexuality, probably, I would guess. I'm no scientist.
And how does it matter? I think, yeah, it doesn't, I guess, yeah, it does matter, actually. I think it does matter, and I think it matters to me, and I think it matters to everybody else. Like, it matters to me if you know who you are sexually. You know what I mean? I don't want to have to figure it out.
Yeah.
It matters to me if you're confused about your sexuality, or if you've got issues about that. Yeah, that's a problem, because if I don't know exactly where you're coming from, I'm not going to be able to know if you're my cup of fucking tea. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, yeah, I'm straight. I mean, I know for a fact that I'm straight, but for instance, like, if I'm dealing with a man who's unsure of himself, that's going to fuck up our whole dynamic. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah, I think it does matter. It matters to me, and I think it should matter to people, but not in the sense that, not in a judgmental sense, but in a sense that you have to weigh these things up when you decide to engage in a sexual relationship with somebody, or else everybody's fucking awkward and confused.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
just like the idea of like polyamory or an open relationship, you want to understand what people want, so you're not in a situation, or if I was in a relationship with someone who was bi, I don't know if I would want to be with a guy who was having sex with another guy. I have never felt like that was, I don't know how I would feel about that. But I don't know. But then here's the other thing. I might be kind of gay, because like, if my boyfriend who I want to please wanted to have a threesome, like, maybe I would be open to it, but it would be more about pleasing him, and I would be getting off on the fact that he liked it. But I really hate it when girls in bars are like trying to act gay to get guys. Yeah. So the whole thing is very complicated.
People do that. Yeah. People act gay to get men.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like girls will try hooking up with each other because guys think it's hot,
Really?
and girls want to be attractive to men.
Yeah.
that's kind of juvenile in my opinion, but maybe I'm just a psycho. I don't know.
This was common in like early 20s, I should clarify, like in college when people are trying to figure out what's hot.
I think I know what you're talking about because that was like in that movie White Chicks. You remember in the movie White Chicks? They were like all over each other and they were like always constantly like doing this homoerotic lesbian shit, but it was meant to like turn on the dudes and it was meant, you know what I mean? I think that kind of reminds me of that shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to throw out. I listen to the Pornhub podcast every now and then to like remind myself that cool chicks exist. Everybody here is a cool chick, but there's a lot that aren't. And I was listening to Asa Akira and Caden Cross, both porn stars, talk about there is nothing more unattractive than a man who tries to be dominant in bed who doesn't deserve to be dominant, like personality-wise. And I just thought that was really fascinating. I was like, all right, thank you. Like, I kind of knew that already, but it's just good to hear it from a woman. You know what I mean?
I mean, I guess, like, I'm not sure what they mean by doesn't deserve to be, but if you're, like, putting it on as...
I don't know either, but...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he's a fucking ponce, that's what they mean. They mean if he's a ponce. You know what I'm saying? If he's a weirdo or a nut or he lives in his auntie's basement, you know what I'm saying? And he's suddenly trying to be Mr. fucking hard-ass dominant, that doesn't jive. Like, there has to be a level of reality to his day personality that translates, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, you don't get the nebbish guy in the basement in the office, like, with the glasses and, to suddenly come home and fucking be the man. You know what I mean? Like,
can I say how I perceive it like this? It's like calling a girl a bitch. Like, it's hot if the guy fucking believes it. Yeah. Like, if he's calling me, like, you fucking bitch, I'm like, ooh. Yeah. But if you're like, come on, bitch.
Yeah.
It's like, get the fuck out of here, you fucking faggot. Like, no, you have to believe it. You have to be dominant. You have to feel it. You have to feel the dominance. But if you're just, like, trying to put on an act and you don't believe it in your heart of heart, the dominance, it's not going to be authentic.
Oh, yeah, because that energy is infectious.
I see what you mean, but I have this, so there's this idea that, like, people who are kind of almost submissive in their regular life, like their professional life or their day-to-day interactions, are more likely to be dominant sexually, and people who are more, am I saying that right? Yeah, and people who are more kind of domineering in real life like to be often submissive sexually. And so I see how, like, it has to come from this genuine place for it to be attractive or believable or whatever. But also that can be something that I think because it's suppressed, it comes out, like, hyper realistically.
I think what they mean also more or less is that I wasn't meaning so much that, you're right? So, yes, it could be the very kind of meek guy at the office, but he would deserve it if he's the fucking boss. Do you see what I'm saying? In reality, like, he can be meek and soft and very nice, but how much does he command?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is he the boss at work? Has he achieved something in his life? Is he in command of his life? You know what I'm saying? That is what they mean by he needs to deserve it, because if you're not in command of your life, that is what comes across. It's not the fact that he's submissive during the daytime. Right. He could be submissive. He could be very sweet. He could open up all the doors and he could be the most polite guy. But, you measure his magnanimousness by how much he commands a room. And that's about how his achievements, his wealth, his status, and all of that shit. So that's what they're saying in the sense that, I think that's what they mean, because that's what I think, a guy what they mean by in terms of deserving it. If you haven't achieved anything in life, how the fuck you going to achieve my ass?
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
The most attractive the most attractive quality that a person can have is being the master of themselves, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Yeah. The confidence in who you are, and then in the bedroom, the confidence in, like, how you want to express your sexual aggression.
Right. Right.
So.
I love just the quote, express your sexual aggression. That's my favorite.
Yeah, I actually got that from Freud. I didn't make that up myself.
Oh, darn. Well, I love that we kind of went into BDSM for like no reason at all, but well, we wanted to start off with, I have this sort of list of symptoms and causes of the symptoms, and so we kind of like will weave in and out of all of these things, but let's start with this possible symptom that I've noticed, at least, that gender dysphoria is on the increase in our society, or it seems that way. What do you guys think about that phenomenon?
Well, I think that that's a product of social engineering, and it's something that's been shoved in our faces in the media, and the goal is for people to be confused about who they are, because people who are confused are easily controlled and not likely to fight back against, the system, the corrupt system.
Dorothy, I want to hear you on that one.
I don't know. I think that the thing, I don't know. I think all of these type of things that they say is always very skewed, So that yes, it's the sexual dysmorphia is on the rise. Where, where, what part of the country? Because you're not, any of this news or these studies never really talk about, the entire country. They always talk about a very small, population. So yes, maybe it is in that population, and yeah, I guess to a certain degree, and because classes are changing and we have a new generation coming in, there's going to be sections of society, especially with a lot of young people as well. Usually, sexual identity is the first thing that kind of gets skewed or goes under. You know what I mean? Becomes very extreme, or the numbers become extreme, or what we perceive of to be the numbers become extreme. Like in the 20s, we saw this. Suddenly it was like orgies. Oh my God, orgies in the 20s. We're doing. Cocaine was legal. Drugs were legal and things like that. Marijuana was like just about to be like criminalized and things. So it's like, and at that time, it seemed like this increase, in society being extremely debaucherous, and then in the 80s we had the AIDS, it was like, oh my God, this, everybody's just fucking each other, everybody's got AIDS, you know what I mean? There's always this constant like fear, in a way, fear mongering to a certain degree about this kind of supposed increase in sexual like problems and things like that. And I don't know, I it's hard for me to kind of, to make a comment about it or have an opinion about it, because I'm not sure that that's accurate. Mm-hmm. In the first place.
I agree with you, Dottie. I'm commenting on what I've seen the media present as what's happening, but in no way do I perceive what's happening in the media to be a reflection of what's actually going on in society. I think that there's a certain percentage of people that are gay or have gender dysphoria, but is that on the rise? I haven't seen it personally in my life on the rise. I'm only 34 years old, but yeah, I completely agree with you. I haven't seen evidence of this. The reason why where I'm hearing this happening are from people like Lindsay, because you've worked in the school system, and only recently you shared with me that you saw it as an increase throughout your career. So I should state that the last time that we had this conversation, I actually didn't think it was happening at all.
Yeah, well, that's what's interesting to me, is that just like you're both saying, the media is definitely focusing on it a lot and saying that there's an increase, but also we're seeing an increase in the representation of people with gender dysphoria or people who are transgender, identify as transsexual or any of those things. And so, because this is what I believe could be happening, is that because we're focusing on it so much and seeing so much more of it, then it seems like that is conditioning young people to identify in that way. And there's so many complicated aspects that go into why a young person might identify that way, and a lot of them might not have anything to do with their actual true feelings of identity. And that's what worries me, is that they're seeing that you can get a lot of attention for identifying outside of the box, and you can get a lot of attention all around the board too, right? Like from all your peers, from all of your teachers, from your parents, from the medical community, and now from any sort of outrage that you can produce in relation to that.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, was outrage. I think it has something to do with outrage culture. I mean, I've met so many people that have gone through so much worse than someone who isn't sure about their sexuality, right? And it just makes me wonder if we're just harboring this environment where people don't, like, I don't know if you, I'm sure we've all met somebody where nobody real, like, nothing really significant, really, like, that makes us cringe, has ever happened to them, but they just treat it like the craziest thing in the world. And I understand that, like, things like PTSD can happen for what, people like some of us here would see as like the dumbest reason. But I, understand that if someone has never gone through anything and then something happens to them, a parent dies, whatever it is, that becomes like their whole life. And I've met people and have known people that will not stop talking about, their life story over and over and over again. And I just think there's no way that all these kids are deciding in like kindergarten that they're, they know what gender they are or what their sexuality is without there being some sort of harboring of this behavior somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is because I'm not necessarily looking for it. But I just think that I think that we are not grateful for how good that we have it. And every little thing becomes like a whole dramatic event now. And you look for trends if you're a young person. And it became a trend. And it's just, I can't wrap my head around it, to be honest with you. But I would say that would be the source of most of it.
Well, that's an interesting duality or dichotomy sort of that exists too, where it could be that there's always been a generally kind of higher level of transsexual or transgendered or gay people, right? And that now we're noticing it more because it's more like loud and okay to be out about it or something.
Which I agree with also.
Right? Like that could be true, but then there's also this phenomenon that like adopting that and coming out, it gets you, like we were saying, all this attention. And so if you're kind of enabling people to feel outraged and victimized for something, then there's another way that you're encouraging them to be outraged and victimized. And so there's some way that we're feeding into this that's negative, right? And this is not to say that you shouldn't. There's very real oppression that goes on with any minority group that exists, right? That is just
Absolutely.
Something that happens.
Absolutely.
So we should not ignore actual oppression and whatnot. So I'm not saying that, but it's all this like very fine line that exists,
Well, it was because of the oppression that you see it as this outgrowth. When you repress it's not like there's an increase. If you look back in times when men used to wear wigs and makeup, and whores used to walk the streets freely, and there's what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was the oppression of sexuality in the 20th century that came through the American dream, this whole it was the beginning of the control. You know what I'm saying? How do we contain and control? We set up the ideals. The ideals involve what? Christian ideals. Don't be a faggot. Don't be a nigger. Don't be fucking born out of wedlock. Don't. These are all of the wonderful things. Now we invent political correctness. This is the correct way to live. This is not how we live. This is the correct way for you people to live.
Yeah.
We begin to adopt this. And then we begin to be their like little armies for this, right? Now we're factions, who's more correct than the next person, And then what happens is you begin to forget who we are. You begin to forget that faggots and transgenders and niggas and white folks and all of us have all been around fucking each other before, right? But now all of a sudden it's not right. Now all of a sudden, in order to have this dream, in order to have this comfortable life, we have to follow suit. And it's like this drip, 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 drip. So then what happens now, you got a new generation, and the new generation is saying, fuck you. We're going back to the way it was before all of that. And it feels like some kind of like, well, we have an increase of a lot
like
of
a social
sexuality
revolution
happening, and we're having. It's not a revolution. It was that way to begin with. That's not a revolution. It's normal. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're coming out and they're kind of being born into a society where they don't have that oppression on them. This is normal behavior. This is not out of the ordinary behavior. This is not extreme behavior.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Behavior because it's been put into a construct that's been fed to us that this is extreme. And so that's why I just think that, the oppression of it all is very much led to exactly where we are right now with the perception of where it's at.
You know what that reminds me of? How, several decades ago, when there was someone who was expressing themselves as left-handed in school, they were forced to start writing with their right hand. Right. So there might be the same amount of left-handed people, but everyone was forced that. But nowadays, when someone's left-handed, they're like, "Oh, look at you! You're left-handed, lucky lefty. You're special." But are people saying, "Have you checked to make sure that you might not actually be left-handed?" Yeah. But how can you force someone into accidentally thinking that they're the wrong dominant hand? So that's an actually interesting thing to juxtapose those two ideas in terms of sexuality and your dominant hand. How much can social engineering make you think that you're right-handed and you not write like a fucking retard? But how much can social engineering affect your sexuality? To me, I don't know how much social engineering can make me more gay, but maybe it's all the television shows about prison that makes me think I might fuck a chick in prison.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Well, and I'm like, when I was a kid and people had glasses or left-handedness or anything that they kind of stood out and got attention for, I was jealous. I was like, why can't I have glasses? And why don't I want to be left-handed? And that's what makes me wonder how much of adopting oppressed identities is something that people are doing to get some attention. I hate saying it because I know people are going to listen to that and be like, what a bigoted fucking bitch, but I recognize that there's tons of people who are genuinely transsexual and homosexual, and it's a beautiful thing. I just think there's also a section of people that are now adopting that in order to get that attention. And I have this thing where I'm like, why are we so obsessed now with the label, right? Why is it so important that we know that this actor or this actress is gay or they're homosexual? They're like, oh, this trans actor is in this movie and that's so special. And I'm like, I remember Eddie Izzard. Nobody ever fucking told me he was trans. And then I watched his first stand-up, and that's when I would have figured that out, right? So, why would it doesn't matter. That's why I wonder, why we're so obsessed with it.
It's like a psychic version of when you go by an accident and you rubberneck. You got to see every bit of it. I think that's what it is. I think it's just people want to know all of those labels because they want to know all the sordid details. Mm-hmm. The labels give you insight into the details. What is he fucking? How does he fuck it? Does he fuck it this way? Does he take it that way? What does it look like? When he takes it off, what does it look like? It's all this kind of morbid curiosity, again, which comes out of the oppression because we don't talk about it, but people are thinking about it. So they want to know that this is another very polite way to find out by having a label. Well, if you're a transgender, actively sexual receiving top, that gives me an idea of what kind of sex you're having. But you know what I mean?
But I think there's an aspect of it where they're battling for supremacy. Well, in my new film, I have a black person and a trans person and a gay person and a No,
I really don't think it's that deep. I really don't think it's that fucking deep. Because honestly, nobody gives a fuck. I really honestly believe it's a morbid, sick kind of sexual curiosity because they want to see it. They want to hear about it because it's foreign. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, if it really mattered that much, right? If it really mattered that much, then none of it would matter. Do you know what I'm saying? Nobody would care if you were transgender. If it really mattered that much, then the whole idea of having so much kind of bigotry against it and all of it wouldn't be there. You know what I'm saying? So it's you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's shallow and then it's deep at the same time. To me, it's just all part of the same thing, the shallowness.
Yeah, I struggle with that a lot. What you're talking about to an extent is kind of like when you mentioned uh, almost like a paranoia. You know, if you mattered that much, if you mattered that much, that's almost like a paranoia that people have that's instilled in, you know, the media to these people a lot of the time. Because, you know, I hear people say all the time, you know, libertarians, well-adversed economists, it's not, you know, everybody freaking out the way that the media portrays it. It's only like a small subset of people, and then they put those people on a spotlight. And I have to cope with that because, you know, I work on things where I have to wonder if a person's dangerous and if, you know, something's going to happen to me. And, you know, a van sitting outside, and I walked outside one time and asked the neighbor, if they know why the van's sitting there, and I looked like a crazy person. So it's, you know, it's almost like we've got a ton of people watching the media, and they're like me, walking outside, you know, asking the van what they're doing there, and it's like there's nothing there.
See, I'm more.
You know, just relax. You'll be fine.
Like definitely more conspiracy theorist about it, where I feel like this is an intentional molding of society into people who are hyper aware of their identities, their labels, and therefore their differences in order to divide us even more. I come across stories where there is a trans character in it, or there is a black character in it, but that wasn't something that was highlighted. It came about because it was a natural progression of the story. And then I see other stories where it's like, they're like throwing it out and shoving it in your face, and it's like, that wasn't even part of the story, it didn't even matter to the story, but it's like this highlighted aspect of the character, you know? And I feel like this sort of contrived
construction. It is contrived. I think you're right, though. I think it is contrived because
I agree.
But I think it's contrived just to make us believe that these things matter.
Right.
But they don't get you right, and I agree with you. They don't really give a fuck. You know what I mean? They really don't give a shit. You know what I mean? You would know if they really gave a shit. You know, it's like that Borat. You ever see Borat movie? Yeah. All right. Did you ever see the episode where he's in the house down in the South, right? And he does all of these socially unacceptable things, right? I mean, it just gets worse and worse.
The Jew down the well.
It gets worse and worse, right? And then at one point he brings the bag of shit to the table, right? Because he acts like he doesn't know how to take a shit in civilized society, right? And they put up with every piece of like uncivilized behavior, right?
Right.
And they just the most polite Southerners, which is so polite and we just care and everything. Until when? Until he brought home the fat black prostitute.
Oh shit.
And the decorum went completely the fuck out the window. They threw him, his bags, and his bag of shit out the front fucking door. You know, and that's a statement. That lets you know, it lets you know if they really gave a shit, you'll know. When they really give a fuck, you'll know. And it's usually for the reasons that you don't think. You know what I mean? But all of that other shit, they don't really care. You know, they just whip us up into a frenzy, like you say, to get us to believe that there's all these differences, you know, and it's like, you know, it's the bait and switch, you know?
Yeah. I think that diversity is wonderful, but I mean, the way that they always have to have a token person in every category. This is my experience when I did reality television. There is this one pilot that I did, and I was obviously the token girl in the wheelchair. You know, there was a token little person. There was a token black woman whose actual name on her driver's license was Baby.
Oh,
you know, with big, you know, and then there's the gay guy, and just everything that, I mean, it's been a while, it's been a couple years, so I can't remember, but every single person did fit some kind of stereotype, and we were all getting a kick out of it. And just really quickly, I went into that situation thinking, oh, I'm going to meet a bunch of fucking idiots today. I'm going to be the smartest person there. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was such a humbling experience. You know, these people that wake up to be on the back lot at 7 a.m. and like really are trying and like, you know, move from like the middle of nowhere to try and make it in Hollywood. Like these people have master's degrees. They work really hard and they're smart, but they ask us to, they dumb it down. It's scripted reality. So they say like, oh, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And, you know, they come up to me and they're like, you know, we love that you're getting along with so-and-so who was the little person. They wanted the person in the wheelchair to be, you know, with the little person, and you know, and they just wanted everything to be so engineered. And it was really sad because if they had just turned the cameras in the opposite direction and everyone could just be themselves, although we were all diverse people, we had so much in common, and there would have never been any fighting like you see on, you know, like Jersey Shore and stuff like that. I really believe that all these people could possibly be very intelligent beings, and they're just acting.
Well, and then it's like, it would be much better television to watch you guys all being fucking badasses together instead of whatever else they had in mind, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I also want to talk about the kind of crisis we have in language, because I feel like, you know, we're having this very frank discussion, and we're very open with each other, and it's very heartening and refreshing, but it's actually difficult to discuss a lot of these things with most people, because I think one of the number one reasons why it's hard to discuss is not necessarily because the subject matter is sort of taboo, but more because the language is a barrier for people. Everyone's terrified of offending each other. What do you guys think?
Yep. Yeah, and that's the van sitting outside that I was talking about, you know, and it's just it's really sad to see, because I just want to see people tell everybody, you know, in the world, like, it's okay to be different, it's okay to have opinions, it's okay to talk about it, because when you shut down conversation, how are you ever going to get to a resolution about the issue? And that's what they're doing. And there's a guy named Vox Populi who wrote a book called 12 Steps to Survive a Social Justice Warrior Attack. It's something, give or take. People can look it up. And number 4 is never apologize. Because he says these people are like, you know, cannibalistic pack animals. The moment that you deviate from the group, they eat you too. And, you know, they're just shutting this down. And I just don't appreciate it, because I would rather be super honest than have an elephant in the room. And I think that elephants in the room, like, lead to fucking cancer. You know? I think they lead to, like, tumors and shit. So I just, you know what I mean? So I just don't get it.
Yeah, if you can shut someone down immediately by being offended at their language, then the conversation stops, and like you're saying, nothing ever gets addressed, and the problem remains, you know, you just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
I am so confused with the changes that are happening in language when people are using the word they instead of he or she. It really confuses me. I'm not used to it at all. And only recently I've, you know, heard people say they, and I honestly am just lost. And it's almost like being transported to a different country and people are speaking a different language. Like my brain turns off and I'm like, are there more than one person? Who's being spoken about? And yeah, so just that one word has caused so much confusion. I mean, I'm fucking sick of it. I don't really care who I offend anymore. I am who I am. Like, my soul, like, I love people so much. If they're going to be offended by the words I use, like, if they can't feel, like, where I'm coming from and the intent out of my voice, then seriously, fuck them.
Yeah. Well, I had this, like, corollary where when I'm young, you know, I was like, I'm Elizabeth now. You have to call me Elizabeth. And everyone was like, what the fuck? Okay, I guess. And when they wouldn't, I'd be like, no, it's Elizabeth. Like, but you can't fucking expect people to just suddenly forget that my real name is Lindsay and start calling me Elizababeth. It'll take time, right? You have, like, if I'm going to do this as an adult and demand that people use certain words in reference to me, you have to expect a margin of error, and you have to be forgiving about that. Or else, when you tell me that I have to address you in a certain way and I forget or I slip up because you do not appear to my brain to fit that, or it wasn't what I was trained to call you before then, you know, like that, it's just going to happen. You can't, I just won't talk to you anymore if it's that big of a problem. I can't help it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And on the same token, I think it's 100% your right to ask people to call you anything you want, ever, no matter what the circumstances are. It's also 100% their right to not do so. And you just get to decide whether you want that in your life or not.
Totally.
Yep.
That's where I'm at.
I mean,
Say
Sticks
what
and
you want to
stones.
say, and then the consequences, the cause and effect. You're going to say what you're going to say, and people are going to respond, and it's going to always be a learning experience for everyone.
I have another story. When I moved onto a reservation, you know, I was trained as a white person in political correctness culture to call Native Americans Native Americans. It's still my number one go-to when I'm discussing those groups of people. And I moved onto a reservation and I was saying Native Americans all the time, and finally my students were like, you know, you don't need to call us Native Americans, we're Indians. And I was like, well, isn't that like rude? Like, you're not from India, and that was a misnomer and all of this stuff. And they're like, we call ourselves Indians, call us Indians. And it's like,
Oh my gosh, I had no idea you were going to say that. I thought you were going to say indigenous people or something.
no, it was like the word you had been trained to never call them. They're like, that, call us that. And
Who trained you not to call them that?
white people,
Cool,
right?
white people. Yeah,
So, like,
totally. I get annoyed when people say Indian. Now I'm like, boom, mind blown. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I learned something new today, Lindsay. Thank you.
Well, there's another lesson for you, that like language should never be a barrier, because they had the just simple fucking common sense to just tell me what they wanted to be called and not be offended at what I had called them in my ignorance, you know.
We're so fucking retarded in America. Like, Dottie, you might get this. Like, when I'm in the Netherlands, you know, I'm trying to practice my Dutch, and I would be in a supermarket, and I want to ask the person, like, oh, where can I find the cheese, for example? And they started their sentence with "je moet gaan," which means you must go. And I'm like, why are they saying I must? Like, in America, if someone who's been working at fucking Albertsons for 20 years will be like, I think maybe if you go to aisle 5, you might find it there. And like, I'm in Dutch, and they're just like, they don't really have a word for should. Je moet, you must. Like, they're just literally telling me where to answer my question. You must go here. And I'm like, they don't like me. Why doesn't this person in the Winkel like me?
Yeah.
And like, and I realized, I'm like, this is like retarded American shit going on right now, that everyone needs to, like, you know, rescue everyone from their emotions.
Yeah. We all
Well,
have
I
to
don't
be,
know
like,
what
super
part of him.
submissive.
I mean, I'm really shocked. Are you serious? You felt like that, like over that?
You know, I mean, I'm a little retarded. Like, I want the Dutch people to love me. I wanted her to, like, be like, oh my God, you're American speaking Dutch. Let's go to the aisle together. But she's just like, yeah, go over there. I should have felt good though, because she was treating me like a native speaker. Because Dutch people never want to speak English to Americans.
It is
I mean, never
like
want to speak Dutch.
we are like trained into submission. It's like why in the United States we have this common pattern of our conversation, where we like end on the up, because that is the question, and then we're not being aggressive, like that's our trend.
Oh yeah, that's the manager voice. And I remember I went upstairs one time when I was called up, and what happened was I worked in a grocery store. This woman says, you know, this is a problem. It was just a problem. And I go upstairs, and because I told the girl, this isn't going to change. I'm sorry. I've been working here for 5 years. It's not going to change. Okay. And they pull me upstairs. Why'd you tell her that? Because it's true. And they go, and they're like, well, we just think blah, blah, blah. And they're doing the whole manager thing. And I'm like, so you want me to lie to her? And they go, no. And I'm like, now you're lying to me. And I could never wrap my head around that, like, corporate culture.
It's like whatever's the least aggressive way of being, you should be, unless you have to be aggressive to get ahead, and then you should be aggressive. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I just don't get it.
Well, Dottie, did you want to weigh in on the language crisis, sort of hyper offense culture?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, because I don't know who you're talking about. You know, like, I don't know who these people are that are so worried about offending people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't. Maybe they're. I live in Philly, so I don't know where these people are. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what part of the country you're talking about, or if this is like some.
I know.
I just don't understand, you know. So it's very difficult for me to, you know, because I just, you know, I don't have any problem saying anything to me about anything, and they didn't give a fuck about my feelings at all, or my kids' feelings, you know, my father's feelings. Nobody gives a.
You have to go to Portland. Portland
is that okay? All right.
Okay. Dottie, one time when I was with Joe, our mutual friend Joe, in Philly, I said
I mean, I'm really being serious. You know,
Someone looked at us. I was in shock. Someone looked at us and said something to Joe, and he said, "Shut the fuck up, you ugly motherfucker."
Exactly. That's how we
some random person. And I was like, "Oh, this would never happen in California."
Oh my God.
I mean, Jesus Christ. I can tell you. Listen. All right. So listen. Okay, I'm going to tell you a quick story. You guys might find this funny. The other night, this is an example of Philadelphia and parts of Philadelphia, which may be on both sides. So it's 11:30 at night. I live on the first floor, and I have these goofy fucking neighbors, these white people who live next to me with their dogs. And they're nice people. You know, they're normal, nice motherfuckers. But for some reason, every weekend, they're outside my window talking about some crazy shit. So the other night, Domino is here, and it's like, it's 11:30, and I'm up, but they don't know that. You know what I mean? It's 11:30 at night. Like, I hear them talking, and they're talking about some beeping noise that's happening on the corner. And it's the three of them, and they're like huddling and talking about, well, this beeping noise, it doesn't sound normal. It doesn't sound normal. It's on the corner, and maybe we should call. You think we should call somebody? I think we should call somebody. We'll call the police. All right, we'll call the police. And I hear them on the phone, the police, right? They're like, well, we hear this beeping noise, you know, and it's like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think somebody should come out and take, because we're not sure about it. It sounds dangerous. All right. So then they're still talking, and finally I'm like, fuck this. Every goddamn weekend they come up with some bullshit. So I open up the door, and they're like, do you hear the beeping? And I said, no, I don't hear the beeping. All I hear is you talking about the beeping. So then I'm standing there, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then I hear the beeping, and they're like, it's down on the corner. And I said, all right. So I shut the door. Now I'm stressed out. I'm like, fuck it. I need to go get a Black and Mild. So I grab $1, and I'm like, Domino, I'll be right back. And I open the door, and I say, well, I'm about to walk by the beeping. All right. And they're like, are you sure? It's right on the corner. And I was like, damn right, I'm sure. I'm getting myself a fucking Black and Mild. You know, stressed me out talking about it. I'm walking by it. All right. Well, I can see she's going down there. All right. Okay. The dogs are barking. All right, fine. I get to the corner, and I look down. You know what it is? It's a fucking handheld jumper cable for a fucking moped. And it's beeping because the battery is low. And it's beeping low battery. Beep, beep.
Fuck?
It's a handheld fucker. It's a 5-pounder. It's like you couldn't even start a car with this fucking thing, right? And I stood there. It was literally on the corner. It's like 20 feet. I live 20 feet from the corner. And I looked and I said, are you talking about this? They're like, yeah.
Oh,
and I said, it's a fucking car. Oh, really? I said, did you look at it? No, we don't go anywhere anything's beeping. We're too afraid. I said, all right. I said, okay.
Christ.
And I went to the store. And I was like, you called the fucking cops on this. Now, to put this in perspective, right? To put this in perspective, last summer, one of the wacky fucking white men I was fucking climbed into my window on the same street in broad daylight. Was anyone called?
No.
Nobody. No fucking cops were called for that shit. A grown, huge, 300-pound white man can climb into the front of my fucking window at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All right? Nobody calls anybody. Nobody gives a fuck. They know I live here. I'm a single black woman with a child. Let them in there. Fuck it.
Yeah,
They're afraid of kink shaming you.
Fixing something. You know, maybe he's a janitor. He doesn't have a key. Well, you know, give him the benefit of the doubt. These three
They just think you're role playing. It's your sexual orientation. You can only have sex with people that climb your window.
Yeah. So there you go. That's Philadelphia for you. You know, there's some scary fuckers, and then there's some scared fuckers. I don't know.
See, you were asking who we're talking about who's afraid to offend people. It's your neighbors.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a perfect like corollary to this whole thing, because those people have been trained for years and years to like see something, say something. If you hear a beeping, it's probably a fucking terrorist bomb, so call the cops. But like, don't worry about people climbing in each other's windows. That's not what we're focused on right now. I feel like maybe I'm drawing a long bow here or whatever, but like that seems similar to me to this whole manufactured crisis with gender and sexuality and all of this. You know, we're like being trained to like hyper focus on it when it's like, I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man. I guess there's real folks out there that believe this shit. I mean, I live next door to some, so I don't know what to tell you.
Well, that.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it because I did, but for years. You know what I mean? Like when I started activism, it was insane, and we've done a recording that didn't quite work out before, and I mentioned this, but for the fans, this is a real story. There was an article posted by this woman, 168-page article about how Hitler is still alive and working in the White House as a black butler after pigmentation and facial reconstruction.
Wow.
And I opened it expecting it to be satire. No. Totally serious. I quit for like 4 months. I was like, what did you do, dude? Who are you surrounding yourself with? And, you know, I've tried to quit 9 times after episodes like that. So I understand what it's like to get fooled by something, but some people just never learn.
Yeah, that's
just
pretty
never.
Extreme.
That's the rantings of a lunatic.
Yeah, I like me some conspiracy theories, but that's like a bit.
That's what it was.
Much.
Yeah.
But
a bit.
Just a bit. Well, so I wanted to talk to you about, you know, with all of this kind of focus on like celebrating the oppressed or the minority, I guess, and so we're putting everything that was sort of more oppressed in the past, we're like trying to get it to be less oppressed, I guess, by putting it on this pedestal and celebrating it. But in the sort of opposite side of that is that we also seem to be oppressing then the people who were the oppressors, maybe, or something. So we have a lot of what I've seen as like male bashing and cis bashing going on. I wanted to get your guys' impressions about that phenomenon.
I'm very passionate about this. I really have so much compassion for men. I've seen a lot of men bashing in my personal life. It's caused me a lot of pain just to see women hurting men. I see that as a real problem, actually.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't know. Again, it's like, yeah, it's there. I do see it. I see a weird kind of feminization, it seems to be happening, of men. But again, it's a certain portion of society. Again, you know, it's a very narrow portion of society. So I don't really know a whole lot of those men, and that, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like they just, you know, I guess. I just don't see it so much in like where I'm from. So I think it might be culturally, you know, maybe it might be a bit more culturally like concentrated. I'm not saying it's not there at all. You know, I'm not saying that at all. You know, it's of course across the board. I'm just saying that maybe it's concentrated in a particular slice of society. And then you have to ask yourself, why is that? Mm-hmm. So now, why is that? So why are those men in that particular dynamic being treated this way? And then if you start to think about the power play, right? It's really all about power play, right? It's about subjugation and power play, because it's not, you know, it's not really about sexuality. Whenever you start to make people feel indignant or bad or something like that, you know, whenever you start to like intentionally, you know, put people down, now you're fucking with power, right? So now you're fucking with people who are, I guess, some way more vulnerable than you, or something like that, or something has happened. But I think that would be worth exploring. You know, why is that happening in that particular swath of society?
Yeah. Well, here's just like one aspect, one example, one facet. And maybe this doesn't, I'm sorry if this maybe isn't male bashing as you're as you meant, Lindsay, but what I like an example of male oppression is in the legal system, for example. Like if people get divorced, statistically, usually it's going to be the women that get the kids and the house. And I'm just in my personal life, I know men who've just lost everything because of just the worst, most evil succubus women. So maybe it is just what I have seen and in this particular part of society. But it breaks my heart, you know, what I've seen. And so what I've personally seen doesn't reflect what I'm seeing in the mainstream media, where it's women being oppressed and it's women that are trying to rise above all these issues. And so just like the legal system is just one example of where I feel like men are getting the short end of the stick a lot in society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one example, and then I also, this is a really silly one, but men get a lot of shit for manspreading. And I can't even remember who brought it up to me, but someone was, because I was kind of like, yeah, why do men like take up so much space? Is that like a dominance thing or what is it? And then someone pointed out, like, if you have like some balls and a dick down there, like you're gonna want some room for it. I don't have that. I don't need that room, you know. But like, if I guess what they did is they put like prosthetics on some women and were like, try not to fucking manspread, do it, I dare you. And like they couldn't really, like, it's hard to not when you have that, when you got junk down there, man.
So I wanted to ask,
it's matter.
Yeah.
It's things that take up space. Hold on. Lots of space.
Lindsay, did you experience, like, when you say in the legal system, what do you mean? Like, did you see that, or have you heard told of that, or what? Like,
yeah, well, like one of my friends, he went through a divorce, and you know, he lost all the money, lost the house. She was living in his house with a new guy, and the kids, was alienating him, you know, being a parental alienator, and you know, I mean, this is really extreme, but unfortunately, this is not the only case in my life where, you know, lying, the woman lying about there being abuse and there not being. I mean, it's almost like they pick every facet of ways you can fuck over a guy in a divorce, and it happens, and it's like, it's beyond me, because it's like, as someone who even went to the wedding, and it's like, oh, it's like a match made in heaven and everyone's getting along. Like, what is going on in society where people can't even like break up amicably? Like, why do people feel like when they break up that they have to destroy the other person? I mean, like, you know how in the movies it's someone like, oh, if I can't have you, no one can, and they kill them. Yeah. Like, I feel like this is the Overton window, and we're going in that direction where like that is gonna, I know it sounds extreme now, but so many things happening today do feel extreme. Things that I see, it's extreme.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just, because you know, I've seen 2 divorces, actually 3 divorces, and it's like, I don't know, you know, it's always seemed to me, well, first of all, I mean, I've been through my own divorce, and that was not the case at all. You know, there was absolutely nothing I could do right, you know, but then again, I was divorcing a white man, so I don't know if that made a difference.
Yeah.
But I was put, you know, through the ringer, and I was forced to pay child support when I had no money and things like that. So I'm not really, you know, I don't know about all that. Yeah. You know, I mean, all he had to say was that he thought I was crazy, and the next thing you know, I was subjected to all kinds of tests. So I really don't, you know, this whole kind of idea that, you know, these men have been so, like, you know, dragged over the coals. I've also been through his divorce, where his ex was white woman, now 2 white people right now. She played that game of alleging all kinds of crazy shit happened, right? But at the end of the day, it really didn't impact the family. It impacted him in the sense that it made him all depressed. And he's the one who ultimately threw in the towel and made the situation worse. And oftentimes what I have found is that, you know, this idea that suddenly men go into court and are castrated, you know, it's not really true. They don't get, what happens is they go through a lot of shit with the ex, and the ex makes it extremely difficult for them. You know, now it's not going to be as easy as it was before, you know, and okay, maybe that's not right? Maybe that's not fair. But more times than not that I've personally seen, it was the relationship that the man, for instance, maybe had with the child that was from that marriage was more impacted by his inability to get over the divorce, and rather than adapt to his new situation and just buck the fuck up, right? And so ending up like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Well, if I can't get him if I can't have the visitation the way I want it, you're making it difficult for me to see him at all, and then it becomes a very much of a blame game. So I don't know, I don't think that, from my experience, it has not been all that, like, that not legally. And certainly not as a black woman. Like, that's not the experience. And I've known other black women who've been married to white men and been divorced, and it was a fucking nightmare. You know what I mean? So wow. I don't think I think that experience, to a certain degree, is one of those things that they might have maybe exaggerated a little bit. I don't know. Maybe if you're two rich folks and you're at each other's throats, it's the War of the Roses. It gets horrible and bitter, but I don't know. It hasn't been my experience. That's
another example. Another example of like ways I've seen men being oppressed is like I'll just hear people that I know, girls that I used to be friends with, talking about like using words like housebreaking their men so that they can be a good husband, or withholding sex so that they can get what they want, and not just speaking their mind. And they're like, I'm pissed that this happened, so I'm just not gonna have sex for 3 days and wait for him to like figure it out.
That's the nasty stuff like that. Shit. That's the mean shit that they've been doing to guys.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm just hanging out with the wrong people growing up.
I see the same.
I like the people I hang out with now, but growing up, I mean, when I was in my early 20s, that's when I saw shit that like traumatized me and made me fucking hate women for a while. And now I've slowly gotten to, like, Dottie, you and I met in 2006. I mean, you're definitely one of the first chicks that I thought was fucking awesome that I ever met. And how old was I then? Maybe 20 years old. So when I was 20, I started meeting some cool chicks and started weeding out the bitches.
Yeah, but you were pretty
an epidemic of cunts out there, truly.
No, you were pretty clued in even back then. Like, you already, people could tell that you weren't like that. Like, we all knew that you had these bougie ass girlfriends and shit, but we knew that you weren't. You know what I mean? We just felt like, oh, but that's not Lindsay, Well, so it's cool. She'll grow out of him. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that like class and race comes into it a lot, because I think those are really important factors in our society that determine a lot more than we might guess that they do. And I'm wondering, how much it is sort of a constructed. Something you said, Dottie, made me wonder if this like male bashing that I perceive and that Rose is talking about is sort of directed at demasculating the maybe specifically the kind of like the white middle class male persona, to take away that power, because there really is perhaps a destruction aimed at that class anyway, and so maybe that's one more level of that. I don't know. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, maybe we should start making that distinction instead of male bashing. Maybe it is this group, Lindsay. I never actually thought about it as a class or race thing in this particular
thing. That's what it is.
Yeah, Dottie, as you were talking, you're totally right. I'm really glad that you are we're highlighting the differences here that we didn't consider before.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
Go ahead. Well, there's a flip side to everything that you've said, Dottie. I really appreciate you being here, because the flip side of the coin is a little harsh, because, I'm a Hispanic, but I was raised, basically like Irish and German or something along those lines, you know what I mean? And people can kind of tell when I speak to them. So I'm kind of like a little bit of a unicorn, right? And my experience with this sort of thing is... it has nothing to do with race with me. And I was treated like shit because they knew that my family came from money, and they wanted every nickel and fucking dime that they could milk. I mean, I won't even get into it, because I literally have trauma from the way that my family and me has been treated on account of saving face for women. And listening to women about this. And there's actually a saying in jail, if there was no such thing as money, drugs, or women, there would be no jails. And I don't blame women for that.
Right.
And I understand that there's a lot of shit that goes on. I have friends that have had nightmarish stories, just like what you're talking about, Dottie. I mean, women that have been lit on fire or just completely sabotaged in court. But what I will say is that I think it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the seesaw effect of just society and oppression. Is what people are paying for now is the way that women were treated in like the 50s or the 20s and things like that. Those people, I don't like them. I was watching this again with this stupid channel that I have on just for background noise. Men with curly mustaches are the most dramatic, ridiculous people I've ever seen in my life. And I worked with one, and he's a complete scumbag. And it's like, I blame those guys for the reason that the radical left exists. And I didn't understand that until I started to meet those people. And I understand that there's, multiple dynamics to this whole thing. But I got to tell you, you can really get your ass handed to you in court as a guy. And it's not the greatest feeling. I remember standing in front of the judge, and he asked me if I wanted to say anything. And I just said, nope. I didn't even speak. They had to tell me. I was so just beaten down that I shook my head, and they told me I had to say the word no for the stenographer, because I was so choked up. I was like, this is unbelievable. And so I've been through the ringer a little bit too, not like a divorce or anything. And I have a child, and his mother is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I've never done anything without the love of a good woman in my life, ever. I wouldn't have graduated high school. I wouldn't have made it out of jail alive. I love women, but I got to tell you, there's some manipulative cunts out there, and it's not even their fault. It's because they're told that they can't say certain things. I mean, I'm one of the only guys that has been told by a woman that I might have gone to jail for not basically raping a chick because I didn't understand what was happening.
Well, that's like the thing that I kind of come back to with all of this is like the ways that men and women are mistreating each other, and the ways that women are acting like horrible, manipulative. Like, we'll use our genitalia to get whatever we can if we're practicing our worst, lowest selves, and men will do the same. And I just think
they will, and I hate those guys. I hate them,
and it contributes to this division again, right? And so we're like, when we're focusing on like male bashing or female bashing, when we're oppressing either gender or sex, we are contributing to this division, and we're ignoring that what we're really experiencing is this degradation of all people, and this degradation of there is something that is feminine and there is something that is masculine, and no matter which one you are kind of holding in yourself or both, like if you're not kind of embodying the highest like vision of that, then you're contributing to this division and this ability to oppress.
Yeah, and it's sad. It's one of the saddest things ever. I mean, I've studied behavioral sciences, and women are the biggest mystery in my life, and that's why I get along with women like you, is because I get to get that female perspective. And one of my best friends describes herself as a gay man in a woman's body.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing about nature, right? Like, you need both halves of something. So like you, Scott, like probably need, if you're like holding this masculine energy, you need femininity around you to like help complete you. Like you said, you never done anything without.
Recorrect it. We need each other. That's the way it works.
No,
and we're being told it's
well, that's
we don't need you. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't need you. Like we only need you for the baby. Like you psychically, you guys need us. Absolutely, like in that sense.
Well, there's two sides to that coin too.
I might be different, but I definitely
Sweetheart.
need masculine.
Took a tip.
I definitely need masculine.
You see what I'm saying? Do you see like how easily objectified? Like there's such an objective.
I did it on purpose just to fuck with you.
Oh really? Okay, so there's.
But see, here's a way that like society, I think, has really affected the way that the dynamic between men and women, and how it's causing so many issues for men. Women are taught, the way I see it, we're taught to be fucking sluts, and that's cool. And then what we try to do is we try to be like men. We try to go out and get laid and have fun and be a slut. But then maybe the next day we get a little embarrassed. And there's all these women out there that they have a slutty fucking night. They wake up in the morning and they're not men. They're not like, yeah, another number for the belt. We feel bad about our one night stand, and so a lot of these fucking bitches go and cry rape. Because they're embarrassed, because maybe someone found out that they were a slut. And this is just one little story, like one example of how society confuses people, puts them in these retarded situations so that then they have to react in these evil ways that really we're harming each other with these behaviors. And like something like Dottie, I mean, maybe this is like totally not something that you have seen firsthand a lot. I'm curious to know that if you've known women or seen women like I have who will like, try to copy what they see from the media, then get embarrassed and then like change their minds and lie. Have you seen that at all?
Never.
What? Wow. That's
Never.
So cool.
I've seen
mostly women.
I've seen that you haven't seen that because I thought it was everywhere.
I've seen mostly women who have been raped and or molested or fucked like in a way that they weren't completely happy with, and they just shut the fuck up and got on.
And then harm is being caused to the people that have actually been victimized. When we have these other people
like, what's the point? What are they going to get out of it? I mean, these are usually poor women. These are usually neighborhood women. Black or white, they're poor women. So nobody. This idea, I was just thinking about something. It's like it's quite interesting because you're talking about an experience inside of a bubble, of a part of society, and it's really quite sad because it's the people in this bubble. Those people, this continuation of living inside of your own like culture so homogeneously, like in a sense, like it's like you're just like in this little culture, this little culture, and everything is.
We don't have culture in this country. It's what we have
culture. We have culture, but it's not. You don't look. You don't engage with it. You have culture right outside your window. It's the person up the street, right? But what happens is that we don't, a lot of us don't really, like, I'm not saying that you people, I'm talking about the slice of society. You don't engage with the rest of, they don't go outside. The trends that you're talking about are trends about a very narrow slice of society. They don't include immigrants. They don't include non-speaking English. They don't include black folks for the most part. They certainly don't include the homeless or the poverty-stricken because nobody fucking asks them. So these trends you're talking, none of these trends include the real world. And so what I'm saying is that it's like, for me, it's very, very difficult to keep trying to like pretend to be inside this bubble and like have like, who suffers? The people who follow these trends, because you're living inside this colony. It seems like that is not representative of the rest of the world. Like these people don't interact with all of the other groups in society because they get their interaction from the news. The news tells them, how many people are gay. The news tell them how many people are transgender today. Today, the news will tell you how many people this week are transgender. Today, the percentage of our population is now, today the percentages of our they get their interaction with other people through statistics.
I can't stand that shit. I watch the news like football. I can't do it. I watch the news and I just scream at the TV. And I've had to learn not to drive my family insane with it. So it's just every story I see just makes me want to break the TV. I want to take it out back and shoot it.
My point in saying this is that if they were to look outside, we as a whole society, right, will begin to learn from each other culturally. Right, we will begin to exchange with each other culturally, and
one-on-one human interactions instead of just watching TV to look for how to act right.
Right, and then all of these like very confusing issues that we're talking about, that yes, they matter because they do affect a slice of our society, and I'm not saying that they don't matter, right? But I'm saying that the solution to them, in my eyes, is not continuing to discuss them within this slice, because all we are ever talking about are statistics that are not relevant. They're only relevant to us. You can't learn if we agree to all be part of this group. If I throw myself into this group, right? I'm part of this little slice. I'm not Black. I'm not all of the other things that make me outside of this group. I'm part of this little narrow slice. If I agree to that and we continue this discourse, what do we learn from it? We only ever really discourse the statistics and news that is not real. That is only news that has been pumped to us to tell us how to think. It's a futile effort. And so I think to a degree that the only way it's ever going to change is to actually go out and ask other people about life and how they feel, to interact with them, to try and somehow get more in physical, vocal, you know what I'm saying, hand to hand interaction.
Yeah, you got to get out there. You got to get in the trenches.
Like, I don't watch the news anymore.
Yeah,
I don't watch news.
So
I haven't watched news in a year, so a lot of times I don't know what people are talking about.
What's interesting to me is that I don't know if any of us on this panel watch the news. And the other thing that's interesting to me is I don't know any of you in real life. I've talked to Dottie and Scott twice, and a little bit in chat, and then I've talked to Lindsay a handful of times. And so I am in this experience. All of us, in my opinion, are doing exactly what you're describing. We're going outside of our groups to connect with people and talk to them about these exact things. And I almost always only speak from my experience, and I sometimes speak from scientific studies if I feel like maybe they're correct, and I speak from things that have been shared with me firsthand in primary sort of sources. And so that's where I try to come from in most of the things that I share. And I wanted to touch on, when we're talking about women who cry rape, and Dottie mentioned that every single woman she knows has been raped or molested, and that's true of me too. Every woman who I've ever talked to in my real life has been molested, sexually assaulted, or in
I've been raped.
Yeah,
I've been raped. I was raped on my 16th birthday.
I have also been raped at various
and I just
ages.
Walked home afterwards, and I never. But it was not anything.
The thing that surprised me the most after a lifetime of being basically bombarded with that truth was that now that I've started to ask men if they've ever been sexually assaulted, every single man I've ever talked to has been too. So I'm really over this idea that women are super oppressed, because in my experience it has become true that we're all oppressed. And if we only focus on women's oppression, that's another form of sort of male bashing,
separation,
and of division.
And I would just, I wanted to throw something out there that related to what Rose said. You were talking about how, and I've heard this from women, the next day after a slutty night, you don't feel like the best, in the world, right? You wonder if you made a mistake, you want, if the guy wasn't good in bed, whatever. I worry about that. I have.
Well, the girls act like they're in it for a one-night stand, and then they are really in their minds thinking, oh, maybe this is a potential boyfriend, and in the morning they're like, oops. Oh, it was just a one-night stand. Why did I make up this illusion that this was a potential boyfriend? Now he's gone. I'm a fucking slut. This doesn't feel good.
That's why you never stay until the morning. You leave immediately once you're done. You be like, oh, okay, I need to go now.
Life advice.
I take my shoes. Yeah, never stay.
Or if you're at my place, it's just like, ready to go? I'll drive you home.
Yeah, one of those, right? Yeah.
I need my whole bed to myself.
Yeah, I got issues, man. I don't know. You don't want to hear them.
So leave a fucking note at the best, and it's like, I just, any guy that doesn't consider the genetic biological, I should say, because I'm not that smart, difference between men and women. It doesn't consider what you might feel like in the morning about you. Doesn't make clear what you want, things like that. I hate those people with a burning passion, because it's the reason that I'm not more of a successful person. You know what I mean? It's the reason that I get up in the morning and I talk to girls that actually have a brain, have self-respect, own up to their life and their shit. It's the root of a lot of the things that I do. And, so I appreciate being on a panel with girls like you, because I can talk about this stuff, because you can't do it in a bar. You can't do it in the street. You know, because all of a sudden some guy's going to walk up to you and throw like a concrete milkshake at you.
Well, yeah,
and call you a fag.
This is what bothers me about this thing that I'm getting at with the male, every male I know being sexually oppressed too, is they're not allowed to talk about it, because as soon as they bring it up, then some group of women is like, well, not as bad as me. It didn't happen as bad as me. It's not as often. It's not as historically like important. And it's like, how can you discount people's suffering? You know, like, I'm not saying men or women are more oppressed than the other. I'm saying we're all fucking oppressed, and there's a reason why. There's an agenda that is intending for that to happen, and we're letting it.
Well, I think little boys certainly would feel the added component if they were being sexually molested. That women, we're indoctrinated into a heterosexual society. Right. So, you know, we can, you know, I'm not saying that it's worse or better for anybody. Every experience like that is individual. However, within having said that, a boy being molested has to also reconcile this whole stigma of being a fag, you know, because he's been molested by a man. If he's been molested by a man, a lot of boys are molested by women too. Yes. But if he's been molested by a man, I would say that that's an extra component to deal with.
A lot of men I know have been raped by women in their adult life. They would have woken up having have sex with them. That's rape. And they're like, never report it. They never report it. They don't talk about it. And it's like, that's fucked up.
Because they're ashamed of it. They feel like, you know, like, how can I possibly complain about something like that? I should enjoy it. I think a lot of them, they grapple with the fact that they don't enjoy it. Yeah. I think they're first mentally trying to grapple with the fact that, hey, I've always fantasized about this, but now this happened in real life, and I don't feel so good about it. You know what I mean? And I don't think men are used to having that feeling. So
imagine not being able to say anything about it, whereas women are encouraged, and of course so many women don't come out and say something. But we're like almost celebrated, just like the whole idea of being a victim and coming together in victimhood. You are going to find a community as a female rape victim, but where's the community for male rape victims? I mean, maybe in the AA room in jail, but like, where else?
Well, there you go. So this is the thing in this day and age, right? Where is that, right? So then you have to ask yourself again, this is what I was saying before, how much does it really matter? You know, these people who continually always have this kind of this soap, you know what I mean? And when I'm not saying it's not worth discussing these issues, Lindsay, right? I do think they're worth discussing the issues, right? But I think that while we discuss them, we have to always remember the context in which we're discussing them. You know what I mean? We have to always remind ourselves, because how then do we go further than this, right? Right. How then do we, you know, what is the next step at the end of the day? Like, you know, there is the discussion to be had, but there has to be, you know, the mindset switch for all of us. Like, I would want to have something changed about the way I'm thinking from this panel. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, like, I hope that we're always going out into whatever outside our comfort zones to connect with whoever we can and on every topic. And that's part of my hope in doing panels like this, especially if they're difficult subjects to talk about, is having conversations and empowering people to do so more often. But I wanted to get to some of the possible causes, because we've talked a little bit about like an agenda, like a social engineering thing going on that could be intentionally creating these sort of divisions and labels and hyper focus on these things so that we bicker more amongst ourselves and feel more divided. But maybe there's some other causes. Like, can you guys think of anything else? I have one possible rabbit hole that lots of people like to talk about is an environmental factor that causes gender dysphoria and homosexuality. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that it's a possibility. I mean, I've seen evidence for it about the chemicals turning the frogs gay. Mm-hmm. It's possible.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah.
They're becoming women.
Like it's like they have Alex Jones as a soundbite so everyone can laugh at it and dismiss it, but it's actually there's science behind these chemicals causing mutations that come out in sexual presentation.
Yeah, I don't mind the whole Alex Jones soundbite, because maybe people will look into it, because if they actually do look into it, they'll see the science, and there's just like video clips, and it's just like, oh my god, what the fuck, this is actually happening. The question is how much of these chemicals are in, like, you know, my neighborhood, your neighborhood, Dottie's neighborhood, and like how many people are actually turning gay from it, and do you have to drink the water does your mother have to drink the water when she's pregnant? I mean, we really don't know enough, but we know that these chemicals are possible, and we know that these chemicals are being put into the environment. So it's very interesting.
It is
Well,
So
interesting.
how are we ever going to know if more people are becoming gay? Because there's so many factors. We really don't know exactly like how many ways why someone is gay. I mean, the way that I feel is that you're just either born gay or not.
Right.
To begin with, but then maybe there's like we were talking about the Kinsey scale where like everyone's just like a little bit bi, and then boom, just like there was a perfect storm of chemicals that probably caused my stroke, maybe there's like a perfect storm of chemicals that if I came in contact with them I would be like such a lesbian.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like, if the water had so much chemicals in it that it was altering our hormonal balance, which is what it would necessarily have
Wait,
to do, right?
Pause there
The
because
CDC would be all over it. I mean, this would be an outcry, you know?
No, because there is absolutely chemicals in our water are altering our hormones. That's not even debatable.
Right,
That's
but not
fact.
enough. No. I'm not saying
How much
that.
dick can
I'm saying
gay?
enough to make you gay.
Right.
Okay,
But that's
enough
the
to make
thing.
you gay.
But that's
That
the thing
is.
Lindsay
that's the
Rose is
scale.
saying is that we would never
We've
know.
seen it in
We
frogs
can't
for sure, but
know.
we haven't seen it in humans.
And we
That's
can't.
ridiculous.
don't know
I just-
for sure. But in a
That's
laboratory
ridiculous.
environment, it happened to frogs.
Right.
That's
That's what we
ridiculous.
know.
And in a
That's because
laboratory, you have control.
amphibians, and they did that. That's a skewed. Of course, frogs are naturally amphibians. Do have
They do.
a funny component
You're
to
right.
them
You're right.
that
Yeah,
makes
you're
them
totally right
one
about
or the
that.
other any fucking way. So they just, oh yeah, we do it to the frogs. Now we're all gay. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. You know, they're not
No,
turning us
it's-
gay. They
it's a
may be
mix.
subtly changing our hormone levels. You may grow a little bit more hair.
Here's
You
what-
may grow a little bit more this or that, but you're not fucking gay from the fucking
No,
water.
but here's what I will say is that it's very possible that if people have different tendencies, like we were talking about on the scale, that if you were more likely to be like here, let's
So
say,
when I drink a
and then
glass of
there's
water, I'm more likely to suck a
hormones,
pussy.
I'm-
I mean, it's
I'm not.
Like,
I'm not.
I thought
I'm gonna
about
tell
it, but
you,
if I
like,
drink the water-
I have hormonal imbalance, and it affects
Okay.
every fucking part of my life. My thoughts, my emotions, my physical
Right.
body, and every part of my life. And so I can imagine if there are certain hormonal cocktails and disruptors going on that it literally could affect those things. I'm not going to say it will make you gay. I'm going to say that it
I
could,
think that will be you will be that's what we call a predisposition. to
exactly,
being gay,
exactly,
right?
just like the frogs have a predisposition to be able to switch sexual.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. But
that's-
that's not how they put it. They make us believe, and I mean, we're educated people here on the panel.
Yeah.
But listen, I live next door to people who are calling the fucking cops
Yes.
on a handheld jumper box. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, these people who believe this shit on the real world, like, it's dangerous for people to go down that rabbit hole because they do begin to believe fucking nonsense.
I'll never agree with you on
Okay.
that because I
Here's-
think it's dangerous to not ask questions about what chemicals are affecting our hormones.
Sure. And really to be
I
very
agree
discerning about what
with-
they're actually saying, that it's turning us gay. That's absolute nonsense.
I agree with everybody right
also,
now.
just to think about just the chemicals. There's so many different chemicals. That just reminded me of the fact that the different heavy metals that are associated with autism, a lot of autistic people are considered asexual. Now, I actually know several autistic people and Asperger's who are sexual perverts, and I love it. But there's also asexual aspect going on with the whole autism thing. So I'm wondering if the heavy metal and the autism thing has something to do with asexuality. Could heavy metals have something to do with your perception of what your sexuality is?
Well, that actually is interesting too because there seems to be more people who are kind of gender neutral or asexual, identifying in that way, and especially when we consider that there could possibly be a depopulation agenda when we look at the sperm rates and the fertility rates in especially the United States are incredibly low, and nobody's talking about it for some reason. That maybe this is an agenda, and maybe that's one of the.
Is it an agenda, though, or are we just sick of ourselves?
No.
You know what I mean?
That
Like,
it's
maybe
all,
it's a natural human call.
Maybe.
I think it's all negligence. I think a lot of this stuff, not everything, but I think, like, all right, so for example, there's not even accidental, there's just incompetence. I have to explain this about politics to a lot of people, where it's not this giant, it's not 13 people sitting at a table going like this, you know, doing the, like, Austin Powers, like, malicious laugh.
They're lizards.
It's
Right.
yeah, they're not lizards. They're just assholes. You know, it's the guys with the curly mustaches who don't know what the fuck they're doing and they won't admit to it. And then you get these corporations with government subsidies. And then the next thing you know, we got shit in our water that shouldn't be in our water. You get, you know, things in the sky that shouldn't be in the sky because they'd rather save money on their pollution with more pollution or whatever the fuck it is. So for me, I don't want people to just subscribe to the idea that it's all negligence. And I don't want people to subscribe to the idea that it's all a conspiracy. I just want them to consider that it might be a little bit of both.
It's probably the most likely truth is that it's a bit of both. In my humble opinion.
That's it. I just want people to the people that go full-blown conspiracy or full-blown like negligence and corporate hate are the people that drive me the craziest, because I'm like, do you understand? Like, it's like what Dottie was talking about earlier.
Well,
we're all individuals. It's a bunch of assholes in an office.
You could generalize that and say people who go to any extreme are missing the mark, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be somewhere in the middle that's the best place to land. But I want to ask you guys, because we do need to wrap things up, what your kind of final thoughts are on the subject, or your final like message that you want to share with people, or advice you want to give, or any words of wisdom that you would like people to consider as we wrap things up.
I have nothing really.
Nothing.
I really don't. You know, like I'm such a reactionary. You know, I really can't. You know, I couldn't pluck something out of the air. Like, I guess I would just say, you know, I don't know. I think you got to take. I don't know. Just I feel like turning everything off. I don't have a phone anymore. You know, no one can call me. I don't answer. You know what I mean? Everything is like. I don't watch TV. I don't like. I live a full life, but you know, it's like it feels very different and foreign to what I see. Or
you're living a full life in the real world, not in the digital.
Well, I feel like that. Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a necessity for that, because if you don't do that, you know, there is no real digital world. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's a fake out. You know what I mean? And if you believe that, what will happen is that you'll lose the skills to live in the real world.
Amen.
And you become a person who has to be told everything because you no longer know how to think outside the box. And that to me is what scares me. So I just don't have any interest in all of that anymore. And I found that it was a lot easier. This idea that how can I live without it? That again also is just a fear that they instill in you. You can absolutely live without it. And it's like very, very freeing, actually. It feels extremely comfortable. And it feels very real. I feel like I felt when I was 20 again. You know, I feel young again. I don't feel old and oppressed with all of this, like, you know, these heavy things that I have to consider, you know, with all of these, I don't know, these ideas of how we should be living. So I guess that's something for people to consider.
That's a beautiful thing for people to consider.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say how happy I am that we got to do this. I wish that we could have gotten into some of the other topics that we got into last time when we talked for 3 hours and the show got deleted. Like the whole idea of eugenics, which we got into, and how technology is affecting the relationships between people. I would love to maybe come back sometime and just talk about relationships in general, the dynamic between men and women across different cultures. It's been amazing. I love you guys, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to get on a soapbox here since we were talking about popular opinion, and I'll keep it short. I want to shout out to Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle for their recent specials, because if you think those guys don't talk on the phone, you're out of your fucking mind. I listen to Bill Burr's podcast like it's the Bible, just for fun. You know, I'm just like working out, listening to him, and he's you know, a great guy. But I've never heard him mention Dave Chappelle. And what I think happened, this is my honest opinion, is that they talk all the fucking time, and they got on the phone for the last, I don't know how many years or months, and they said, we're going to go soft for this stupid PC culture. Shout out to Patrice O'Neill, by the way. We missed you. And, you know, I think they decided we're going to go ham, but we're not going to do it till we have like 2 shitty specials that go soft. And I just love what Chappelle and Bill Burr did this time around. And I think that everybody needs to do more of that. And, just understand the culture that we're in and learn to fuck it over. You got to lead by example. And I think that's what they did this time around. And they warmed people up for it. So I really appreciate that. And I think it's one of the most important things that's happened in comedy recently. And comedians exist to point out the absurdities in life. And that is also extremely important. So shout out to those guys, because I think they're the shit and some of the greatest of all time.
Amen.
And thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And I also want to second that anytime a comedian is making a society uncomfortable, that's where we're growing. And I think this panel, probably we've all felt some level of discomfort at some point in this conversation. And hopefully the people listening too, because again, that's where we're going to grow. And so thank you all for being willing to be uncomfortable together here. And so fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, concentric, electric dose of wisdom, according to Scott the Realist. Scott, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
According to Dottie the Dreamer, Dottie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And according to Rose the Idealist, Rose, thank you for being here and making this all awesome today.
Cheers.
We can call a thing a million different names, and it will never change a thing's underlying qualities. We can allow for personal expression and changing identities, for experiments in socio-cultural affect and evolving personalities, and it still won't change any foundational truths. We can remake the world in a seeming utopia of acceptance and rainbow sparkles, but it won't change the dynamics humanity has had to deal with seething under the surface of all of that, because there is really nothing undergirding our experience here than is taken into account in our philosophies. The facade we hold up to the social mirror is not who we really are. It's not reflective of what we truly are. We're biological animals on a plane constructed wholly by nature, and nature doesn't give a fuck if you like it or not. It doesn't give a fuck what you name it, and at the end of the day, or the end of the world, will still just be us spiritual beings in these bodies looking out at a world we helped form for the briefest of moments. So as much as possible, seeking to dig further into the roots of what we are so that we can stretch our truth as high as it can reach is the highest good we can accomplish, and the sun will burn away anything that isn't utterly, simply, and truly real. Let's not be Icarus. When we fly up, let's have wings made of feathers, and until your inevitable flight's back up, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
It's a one-on-one lesson, so do your homework. Make your dome hurt while up on earth. My bones are blessed from holy dirt. Vibes manifested to words that told me search for verbs and adjectives to describe birth. Worth more than one can speak, while the tongue feeds a weak, a sour taste in your mouth, bittersweet. Words can also kill you when you sleep. Mind condition, low frequencies while the subconscious mind listens. I can tell a vision filled with lies disguised as truth, and spread it like the word to the youth. Watch the tube. A place where the God gets booed is sorcery. To recreate a God forgery does more than meets the eye. Not too many know. Just hear me flow like the eye of Horus Penio. Yeah, not ready to leave until we believe we're free to go. You hear me, yo?
Sculpted from the ether, the material will eat ya. Stuck on this plane, lanes use jet fuel to greet ya. The dimensional three ain't beating me on top of the fourth. Didn't climb Jacob's ladder to squab with a sword. Forged with ink drizzle, branched out. Try quiet your lamps now. Ascension past the matter, let they slam out they damn mouths. We ain't on land now, but they over understand. Sacrificing wisdom, hoarding dumber kosher wicked hands. Putting faith in worthless worship of the mortals. Artificial portals, mass ingestion of the black goo. Bioengineered morsels, conversing with machine elves. Bypassing maggots, they stuck on Android screens now. I'm scrolling emerald tablets, Moloch living lavish. All off the backs of the savage. Them clasp hands at the Sabbath. Smack of energy damage. They done twisted the tongues. Put nanotech in the lungs. The awakening's begun. All they really can do is fucking
run.